Welcome back. Today we're going to address a question that I had got probably a week or two back. This is from James Crusoe. When I did the dungeon video, he wrote and it was like, hey, I would like to have some information on how to get started. He's interested in getting started in streamer fishing, wondering where to start, what type of setup, so on and so forth. So I wrote him back and I was like, yeah, I'd love to do a video like that. And eventually, what I would like to do is start taking the camera out to the water and explaining a little bit further, but we're a ways away from doing that one yet. Maybe in the coming months we'll venture into that. I'd like to get some underwater footage of some of the flies and everything, just so you guys can have a better idea how they're designed to swim, so on and so forth. But with that, he wrote me back and then he had some a little bit more detailed questions as to what he was looking for. And the first thing that I would say before I address any of these is obviously look up anything Kelly Gallup. He has DVDs and everything out there to where he's actually on the water. I mean, that's where I picked up before I was able to move up to Montana. And obviously, I mean, he wasn't just down the road on the Madison. Him and Johnny and the boys, where I could talk with them and pick their brains a little bit. I watched the DVDs and I picked up a ton of information from them, so that's a good first resource right there. He covers streamer fishing better than anybody out there. But we'll go ahead and get into the questions here. He had a series of 5 of them, and I'll address those as we go through these. But he was asking about the ideal setup for fishing these streamers. Are there cheaper ways to try it, such as a poly leader on a floating line, and the cheapest way to get started? The ideal setup for fishing streamers, in my opinion, is I throw a 7 weight and I have a 280 grain sinking line, 30-foot section of sinking line, and then 20 pound and 12 pound maxima for your leader, and I'll talk about that a little bit further here as we go. But for throwing these big flies like that, you want something that's not going to be tiresome and it's going to be able to throw them effectively, because I mean, with this, it's continual casting. It's one cast after the next. If you're floating, you see a spot to where it's an ideal holding spot for a big fish. You don't want to miss that. You want to have a rod that's going to be able to react and deliver that fly where it needs to go. First getting started, I think he asked about being able to throw these with a 5 weight as well. I would not throw a Dungeon, full size at least, Boogeyman, any of those guys with a 5 weight. What you could throw with the 5 weights, maybe something like this Peanut Envy. It's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit scaled down, it's a little more slender, and you could probably throw those with a 5 weight. It'd still be a little bit laborsome. Miniature dungeons you could do for sure with a 5 weight. But the problem with that is, with a miniature dungeon, if you're throwing it with a 5 weight and a floating line, it's not going to get down to the depth that you need it. They do have those leaders that you can buy that add weight to it. I've never personally worked with them, so I don't have any hands-on feedback for that. I've heard of folks trying them and they said that they're okay. If you're going to go into it, I would go just straight with the streamer specific setup, instead of trying to, I want something that's going to do good for dry flies but also be able to do streamers. You can do it. I would say probably a 6 weight would be your best bet. You can throw these with a 6 weight depending on the rod setup. I use a bank robber. I've been a St. Croix guy almost my entire life. I think the first rod that I had was a Fenwick, but now St. Croix is getting out of the high-end rods, so I'm going to have to find a new brand here before long. So we'll figure that one out later on. But Cheapest way to get started. I would say there are some good quality rods that are out there. There are that are not all that expensive. The Echoes do pretty well. I fish with them. They don't have quite the backbone that you really want for delivering these big heavy flies, but they do okay for a 7-weight. And then the price range on these rods is ridiculous. I mean, some of them you'll see up close to $1,500 for a streamer rod. That's a little excessive in my opinion. But cheapest way to get started, I would say the Echo, probably an airflow line, and then just your 20-pound right here. Now, if you want to go with a floating line, by all means you can. Like I was saying with the dungeons and stuff like that, it'll be a little tough because it has a deer hair head. You may have to put like some tungsten cone heads on your line before you tie it on, and it may help it get down, but you're not going to get the ideal swim that you want. Where a floating line will work really well is if you're doing something like the October, something that has a heavy head and not a lot of bulk in the front, something that's going to accept water and fall. And also the Peanut Envy you can do with a floating line. The thing that I would do different though is lengthen out my leader. I'd probably go the length of the rod, if not a little bit longer for your leader. So I mean, a 9-foot 7-weight, I'd be running at least a 9-foot leader of mono there. Probably, I don't know, 2012 down to 10 maybe, depending on the size of the fly that I'm throwing, but it would all depend on that. And then they ask about tactics for fishing them and fly selection. When to use a Dungeon versus a Peanut Envy, for example. Light conditions is one of the first things that I will take into consideration. Bright day or a cloudy day. On the brighter days, I tend to go with a more slender pattern, something along the lines of a Peanut Envy. Even, this is a full-size barrelly. I probably wouldn't go full-size. I'd probably scale the barrelly down a little bit. Attend it to something that's a little bit more slender and doesn't project as much of a profile. I don't know why, but it seems on certain days, it seems on sunny days that the more slender profiles do better. Low light conditions, muddy water is when I look at the bulkier flies, the Dungeons, the Octobers, the Boogeymen. Low light conditions is when I'm looking to fish those patterns. And if it's a bright cloud, or if it's a bright day, my first fly typically is a brown and sunburst yellow barrelly. I don't know why. It's just it's the go-to on the bright days for some reason. I've caught so many fish on that pattern, it's not even funny. But cloudy day, I'm either a gray boogie or a black October. One of those two is going to be the first one that I throw, and then once I throw that one, I'm going through the rotation, changing colors constantly, changing profiles. It changes continuously throughout the day. I may have had 1 or 2 days to where I only changed flies once or twice, and those are very, very rare. I don't know, for some reason, if it's just maybe it's something in my head, but I feel if I'm not getting eats after, or if I'm not at least moving fish, I got to change a fly probably after 5-10 minutes at most. So I'll change up colors and all of that. But the one thing I am learning is that the more that I learn about fishing in general, whether it's streamers, nymphs, dries, the less that I feel that I actually know. It's a crazy sport. And to be able to figure everything out, it's just impossible. There's days where, you have a real cloudy day and you're smashing fish on a bright white fly with a ton of flash in it. It doesn't make any sense. You never catch fish like that typically on a cloudy day, but it happens. So the more you learn, the less I feel I actually know. It gets confusing at times, but anyhow, that's where I go with that's the first place that I go when I'm making decisions, is to go, between the dungeon and the envy, cloud cover. If it's a bright day, peanut envy, something slender, more slender of a profile. Cloudy day, dungeon, something a little bulkier, something that's going to push and move some water. Also, high muddy water and runoff, find something that's going to push a lot of water. Then he also asks, any misconceptions or mistakes you see people having about fishing bigger streamers? Yes, they think it's easy. They think, they see people catching big fish on streamers all the time, and it's like, well, people catch those all the time. No. I don't know how many days you go out, and if you land one fish certain days, that's a successful day. We're not out for numbers when it comes to streamers. We're out for a certain quality of fish. I mean, typically in a river system, anything over 20 inches, that's a solid fish for a river. You go getting up into that 2 foot mark, that's your next level. Anything above 2 foot's gravy, to be honest with you. I mean, you hear people talking, I had 3 over 25 the other day, and it's bullshit. I want to see people put tapes on them. If they put a tape on them and I can see the tape, yeah, I'll believe it. But you can't tell me you catch 3 fish over 25 inches in a day. I don't know. Unless you're catching bucket fish, which that could be. I don't know. They stock some big bucket fish, but I mean, I don't know. Those are one of the misconceptions I see. People think that it's easy and that it just happens automatically. Hours and hours and hours. 99.9% of your casts with the streamer come up absolutely empty. If you move a fish, that's a success right there. Sticking and landing a fish, hey, that's the best thing that you can ask for. It is very much a patient man's game, for sure. If you're just into catching a lot of fish, nymph. You can catch fish all day long nymphing. You're not going to catch the quality consistently, but that's one of the misconceptions that I see. And then another misconception, and I'm guilty of this myself, I tend to I'm breaking my habit of this, and what really helped me break that habit is fishing the mini dungeons, and like the laser legals helped with that a lot, because they're a smaller fly. I mean, you look at this October, this is about 5 inches right here. The way that I tie on this hook setup, that sits at about 5 inches. You look at the laser legal or the mini dungeon, they're sitting at about 2.5 to 3 inches max. I used to always be on I've got to fish a big fly to catch a big fish. Not necessarily true. Depending on what's in your river system, depending on the food source that's consistently there, big flies don't equate to big fish. Sometimes you can use them as a locator. I know a couple of guys back in Pennsylvania that they'll go through and they will rip just big, obnoxious 7-8 inch flies just to locate fish, because sometimes it's a territorial thing and you'll get them to come out and move, and then you can go back with the smaller fly and actually get them to eat. I don't know. But that's one of the misconceptions that I myself am guilty of, is equating a big fly with the big fish. It doesn't always work out that way. Ideal water conditions. Are there any conditions that make you switch from fishing streamers to something else? Dry flies coming off. That's about it. When we're floating down the river, if I see a couple of fish coming up, I may switch over and, throw the dry fly stick a little bit. I may catch 1 or 2 and then I'm back to streamers. It's very rare for me to go off of streamers these days. I mean, I fish them year round. I stay dedicated to them. No matter the water conditions, whatever it may be, I'm throwing streamers just to see if I can move fish, just to try and learn something new, to try and see. A lot of times I'm out there looking at flies that I've designed to see if there's anything, if it's going to work, if it's going to be something that is going to worth pursuing, worth tweaking, or if I just scrap the idea and go with something else. As far as ideal water conditions, me personally, I love runoff. I love high, dirty water. You find the soft water, you throw something in there that pushes water, there's fish in there and they're still going to be eaten. A lot of people get turned off by the high, muddy stuff. They won't even fish it. I love it. It's simple to me. You find the soft water, you're going to find the fish. Other conditions that I really like, I don't know. I mean, cloudy days. I think cloudy days more so than the actual type of water that I'm fishing. If it's low and clear water, it can be a little difficult. That's where the cloudy days are a little bit better. But I don't know that there's an ideal water condition for me. I'll fish any day. But the time that I really get excited is runoff for streamers. That's probably my favorite time of the year outside of the fall to be fishing. Water conditions, this isn't necessarily a water condition, but when we're coming off a winter, or even when you're in winter and you have a water temperature that may go from, say you're consistently sitting at 36 degrees, if you get a bump in water temperature to 37 or even 38, it can be game on. Those fish respond like that with the slightest temperature increase. Conversely to that, if you're consistently in the 40s and you drop down to 30 something like we had last fall when we got hit by just a ton of snow and the water temperature never recovered, it really slowed things down and it made things difficult. It was a slower fall. I mean, we still caught some good fish, but our water temperatures were probably in the mid 40s. We got hit in September with about 1.5 feet of snow and temperatures in the teens, and the water temperature just plummeted down into the 30s, and it never recovered. So, I mean, it was a strange year last year. But those ticks in the water on the upward trend, those are what I look for. If I get a good, coming off a winter, if I get 2 or 3 degree bump, I'm getting out to the river if I possibly can. And then he asked about how to retrieve twitch, whether it's a twitch or a swing, etc. There's really 2 styles that I use. A jerk strip, where you're jerking the rod and you're stripping the excess. You're actuating the fly and giving it that S swim. You're running it away from a predator, or a jig. So on a jig where you have a heavier fly in the front, like this Envy, it's got I put tungsten on this one, I think. Yeah, this is a tungsten head, so it has a more exaggerated jig style. So I'll jig these a lot, but down the water current, or I don't shoot down and across like a traditional swing. I'll either throw directly upstream if I'm walking on the bank and jig it back to me, or if I'm in the boat, I'll throw maybe 15 degrees upriver and I'll kind of jig it as it's coming down on my retrieve back. Those are the 2 styles that I use a lot. I don't swing flies a ton. I will on occasion, but it's not really my ideal setup. And I don't throw down and across and retrieve them back up. Every once in a while you'll get an eat on that. That's more for bank fishing than anything, but I really don't do it too much. I mean, you'll catch some smaller fish that way, I feel. But if you're after that true predatory fish, I mean, if you get a fly like this in front of him and he's going and he's in the mood to eat, it doesn't matter. If it's anywhere near him, he's going to run it down. I don't know. There's so many different ways. I don't really experiment too much with the way that I retrieve. I found a way that seems to work for me, and I stick with those. I make some minor adjustments throughout, like the when I'm jigging, sometimes it's just like a real slight bump and the rod tip may twitch that much. Other times it's real exaggerated and the rod tip may move 3 to 4 foot, and that fly's doing this more so in the water as opposed to just that little bump. Jerk strip, I mean, I constantly change up. I change the retrieve speed, how hard I'm jerking, how much or how the distance that I'm moving it. Colder water temperatures, you know, I'll have maybe 4 to 6 inches that I try to move the fly. Warmer temperatures, I mean, I may go 6 inches up to 1.5 feet to where I move that fly that much and then pause it. But I'm constantly changing it up. I mean, I don't do one thing probably from cast to cast. I don't go 3 casts in a row doing the same style retrieve if I'm not picking up fish. I'm always changing things up. Let me see here. I think I covered everything. Like I said, eventually I would like to take this out to the river and do some practical stuff with it. Fishing on foot, on the boat, different styles of retrieves and everything. You kind of get a little bit of a better idea for what I'm talking about there. But we'll see how that goes. Got to get out of quarantine here first. But we'll see how that goes here in the months coming forward, and I'd like to get some of that. I'd like to get some footage on that, but we'll see. But James, I hope I was able to answer your questions on this one. If there's anything that I went over and you have further questions, just shoot me a message and we'll get that one squared away. But if anybody else has anything you'd like me to address or go over, by all means let me know, and I'll try and set something up like this and answer those questions. But as always, I appreciate you guys watching and tuning in, and we will catch you on the next fly. Thanks.